Most people walked past him, assuming he was just another homeless man with nothing to offer. But Daniel, he chose to stop. He chose to care. What Daniel didn't know was that the man sitting on that sidewalk wasn't who he seemed at all. And that single act of kindness Daniel gave would lead to a shocking truth and change his life in ways he never imagined. It was one of those nights that seemed colder than the rest, the kind of evening when the streets feel empty, even if cars are passing by. The air bit against Daniel's face as he walked home from another long, grueling shift at the warehouse. His back ached from lifting boxes all day, and his hands were still sore from the constant strain. At 29 years old, Daniel was already tired of feeling old. He tugged at his thin jacket, wishing it offered more warmth. Truth be told, it was a jacket that had seen better days, faded at the sleeves, the zipper halfway broken, but it was all he could afford. Rent alone swallowed most of his paycheck, and what little was left went to food and bus fare. It wasn't the life he dreamed of, but it was the life he had. As he turned onto his usual street, Daniel clutched a small paper bag in his hand. Inside was a warm sandwich and a cup of coffee, his treat to himself after an exhausting day. He had debated even buying it. $10 might not sound like much to some, but for Daniel, it was gas money or a bag of groceries stretched out over a week. Still, he told himself he deserved something. He hadn't had a proper meal in 2 days, and tonight, he'd finally eat. But just as he passed the corner near the gas station, something caught his eye. There, tucked against the brick wall, was a man. His head was lowered, his shoulders hunched, and a thin blanket was wrapped tightly around him. His clothes looked worn, his shoes scuffed beyond repair. Steam from passing cars rose into the cold air, but this man just sat still, shivering quietly. In front of him was a piece of cardboard, but unlike the signs Daniel had seen countless times before, this one had no words written on it. Just a blank piece of cardboard resting against the pavement, almost like he had given up asking. People walked past him without a glance. A couple walked by quickly, holding their coffees tighter, as if to guard themselves. Another man in a suit passed by, staring down at his phone, never even noticing him. Daniel slowed down. His first instinct was the same as everyone else's: keep walking, don't get involved, you barely have enough for yourself. But something about the way the man sat there, silent, invisible to the world, stopped him. Daniel thought about the sandwich in his bag. He thought about the coffee he was about to drink to stay warm on the walk home. And then he thought about this man, someone who clearly had nothing to eat, nothing to drink, and nowhere to go. He hesitated. His stomach growled, reminding him of his own hunger. He was broke, struggling, barely making it. Who was he to give something away when he had so little? But then another thought hit him. What if that were me? What if tomorrow I lost my job, my apartment, everything I had? Wouldn't I want someone to stop for me? Daniel sighed, his breath visible in the night air. He crouched down slowly, placing the bag in front of the man. "Hey," he said softly, almost unsure if the man would respond. "You hungry?" The man lifted his head, and Daniel was struck by his eyes. Tired, yes, but sharp. Eyes that seemed like they carried 1,000 stories, but no words left to tell them. Daniel gently slid the sandwich and coffee toward him. "It's not much, but it's warm." The man's lips trembled as he whispered, "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." Daniel shook his head. "You don't have to say anything. Just eat, all right? Stay warm tonight." The man held the coffee close, wrapping both hands around it as if it was the only source of heat he had felt all day. For a moment, the silence between them wasn't awkward, it was almost sacred. Daniel felt something shift in the air, like this wasn't just an ordinary encounter. As Daniel stood back up, the man looked at him with a mix of surprise and gratitude. It wasn't the kind of look you give someone who just handed you food, it was deeper. Almost like Daniel had given him something he hadn't felt in a long time: dignity. And Daniel didn't realize it yet, but that choice, the choice to stop, to care, to give when he himself had so little, was about to change everything. Because this wasn't just a man on the street. This was someone whose true identity would shake Daniel's entire world. Daniel had no idea that this small act of kindness was only the beginning. In the days to come, this stranger would become more than just someone he helped. He would become the key to a future Daniel never thought possible. The next day, Daniel tried to go about his routine like normal. He clocked in at the warehouse, stacked boxes, checked shipments, and forced his tired body through another endless shift. But even as his supervisor barked orders and the machines roared around him, his mind kept drifting back to that man on the street. Most people would have forgotten by morning, but Daniel couldn't. Something about that encounter had left a mark on him. Maybe it was the way the man's hands shook as he held the coffee. Maybe it was the way his voice cracked when he whispered, "Thank you." Or maybe it was the way his eyes, sharp and watchful, looked at him as though no one had seen him for a long time. By the time Daniel's shift ended, his decision was made. He couldn't just walk by that corner again without checking. Sure enough, when he reached the street, the man was there. Sitting in the same spot, knees pulled to his chest, that blank piece of cardboard propped up in front of him. He looked cold, colder than the night before. Daniel glanced down at his own jacket. It wasn't much, just an old windbreaker he had been holding onto for years. He hesitated for a moment. He knew the nights were only getting colder and he would need it. Daniel walked over and crouched beside him again. "Here," he said, pulling the jacket off his shoulders. "You need this more than I do." The man's eyes widened. "But what about you? You'll freeze." Daniel smiled softly. "I'll be all right. I've got 4 walls and a roof to go home to. That's more than you've got tonight, right?" The man's lips pressed together as if he was holding back tears. Slowly, he took the jacket, holding it close like it was worth more than gold. Daniel sat down next to him, pulling 2 coffees out of a paper bag, one for himself, one for the man. This time, he had planned ahead. They sat together in silence for a moment, sipping. Cars drove by, their headlights washing over them, but Daniel didn't care who saw. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't ashamed. He was just being human. After a while, Daniel spoke up. "You know, it's crazy. I work these long shifts at the warehouse, but no matter how hard I try, it feels like I can't catch a break. Some days I wonder what I'm even working toward. But then I think, one day I'll save enough to start my own business. Nothing big, just a little auto shop. Cars have always been my thing." For the first time, the man smiled faintly. "Sounds like a dream worth fighting for." Daniel chuckled, staring at the ground. "Yeah, but right now, it feels like just that, a dream." The man nodded, his eyes thoughtful. Then he said quietly, "Name's Harris. Mr. Harris." Daniel looked up, extending his hand. "Daniel." They shook hands, and for the first time, Daniel realized something. This wasn't just some nameless stranger. He was a man with a name, a voice, and maybe even a story worth hearing. From that night on, Daniel didn't just see someone in need. He saw a person. Someone who had been forgotten by the world, but who still had value, still had dignity. And while Daniel thought he was simply being kind, what he didn't know was that Harris was paying very close attention. Watching, listening, studying the young man who was willing to give when he had almost nothing himself. Daniel couldn't have imagined it yet, but Harris was keeping a secret. A secret so big, so life-changing, that when it finally came out, it would turn Daniel's entire world upside down. The days turned into a rhythm Daniel didn't expect. After his long warehouse shifts, he found himself stopping by that corner more and more often. It wasn't something he planned, he just couldn't bring himself to walk home without checking in on Mr. Harris. Some nights he brought food. Other nights, an old blanket, or even just a spare pair of socks. But more often than not, he simply brought conversation. Because Daniel had learned something most people never took the time to notice. Sometimes, what a person needs isn't money. It's company. It's respect. It's being seen. They would sit there together on the cold curb, the steam from their coffee cups rising into the night air. Daniel would share stories about his day, how his supervisor barked at him for being 2 minutes late, how his paycheck never seemed to stretch far enough, how he missed his mom's cooking back when she was still around. And then, inevitably, Daniel would circle back to his dream. One day, he'd say with a hopeful smile, "I'll have my own shop. A little place with my name on the window. Daniel's Auto Repairs." I'll fix cars, maybe hire a couple guys. Nothing fancy, but it'll be mine. You know? Something I built with my own 2 hands. Every time he spoke those words, Mr. Harris would listen intently, never interrupting, never doubting him. Sometimes, Daniel swore he could see a flicker of pride in the older man's eyes, like he believed in him more than Daniel believed in himself. "You've got heart, son," Harris said one night, his voice steady and calm. "Don't ever lose that. The world needs people like you." Those words stuck with Daniel. They weren't the kind of empty compliments people throw out casually. They felt deliberate. And somehow, they carried more weight coming from a man who had seemingly lost everything. But as much as Daniel opened up, Harris remained guarded. He rarely spoke about himself, and when he did, his words were vague. He never explained how he ended up on that corner, or what had brought him to this point in life. He listened more than he talked, as though he was studying Daniel as much as Daniel was confiding in him. Still, Daniel didn't press. He figured everyone has their reasons, and maybe Harris just wasn't ready to share his story. One night, Daniel arrived later than usual, his feet dragging from exhaustion. He had worked overtime to cover a coworker's shift, and every muscle in his body screamed with fatigue. But when he reached the corner, Harris was still there, waiting. Daniel handed him a sandwich and sat down heavily beside him. "Man, I'm beat," he admitted with a tired laugh. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever get out of this cycle. Work, eat, sleep, repeat." Harris turned his head and looked at him thoughtfully. "Cycles can be broken, Daniel. Sometimes all it takes is the right opportunity." Daniel let out a humorless chuckle. "Yeah, well, opportunities don't exactly come knocking at my door." But Harris didn't laugh. He just kept watching him with those sharp, knowing eyes. Eyes that seemed to say something he wasn't ready to put into words. And Daniel, caught in his own struggles, never thought twice about it. To him, Harris was just a kind, quiet man who had been dealt a bad hand. He didn't know that Harris was silently measuring his character, watching to see how genuine his kindness really was. Until one night, Daniel turned the corner, and Harris was gone. The blanket Daniel had given him, the cardboard sign, the little space by the brick wall, all of it empty. Daniel froze, his chest tightening. He looked around, half expecting to see Harris just a few feet away. But there was no trace of him. No note. No explanation. Just silence. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt something he hadn't expected: worry. He hadn't just been feeding a stranger, he had built a friendship. And now, it felt like that friendship had been ripped away without warning. Night after night, he returned, hoping Harris would be there again. But the corner stayed empty. And with each passing day, the weight in Daniel's chest grew heavier. What Daniel couldn't possibly know was that Harris hadn't vanished for good. He had stepped away for a reason, and the next time Daniel saw him, it wouldn't be on the street. It would be in a place Daniel never imagined, and in a way that would leave him speechless. 3 nights passed. 3 long nights where Daniel searched that corner with no sign of Harris. The brick wall looked emptier than ever, as if it had swallowed up the presence of the man who used to sit there. Daniel couldn't explain why it hurt so much. He had only known Harris for a short while, but their conversations had started to feel like a lifeline. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like someone truly listened to him, without judgment, without rushing him. And now, Harris was gone. On the 4th night, Daniel trudged back to his small apartment after another shift. His wallet was thin, his body was drained, and his spirit felt heavier than usual. As he unlocked his front door, headlights suddenly washed over him. A sleek black car he had never seen before pulled up to the curb. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a tall man in a tailored suit. His shoes gleamed, his posture was straight, and the way he carried himself made Daniel instantly feel out of place. The man walked up calmly and handed him an envelope. "Mr. Daniel?" he asked in a deep, professional voice. Daniel frowned. Yeah, that's me." The man gave a polite nod. "You're invited. Please, come with me." Daniel blinked, confused. Invited? To what? By who? The man simply gestured toward the car. "You'll see." Every instinct told Daniel to say no. He didn't know this man. He didn't know where this car was going. But something about the situation, something about the formality of it all, made him hesitate. Slowly, cautiously, Daniel stepped into the car. As they drove, the city lights faded, replaced by quiet suburban streets lined with trees and iron gates. Finally, the car turned down a long driveway. At the end stood a massive estate, grand, elegant, the kind of place Daniel had only seen on television shows about the ultra-rich. His heart pounded. "There's no way I belong here," he muttered under his breath. The car stopped. The driver opened the door, and Daniel stepped out, feeling smaller with every second. Marble steps stretched up to a front door taller than the ceilings of his apartment. The house loomed above him, intimidating yet majestic. And then there he was, standing at the top of the stairs, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, hair neatly combed, was Harris. Not the shivering, ragged man Daniel had sat with on the street. This man looked powerful, refined, completely different. Daniel froze in disbelief. "Mr. Harris?" he whispered. Harris smiled warmly. "Hello, Daniel." Daniel shook his head, his voice cracking. "What is this? What's going on?" Harris descended the stairs slowly, each step measured, until he stood just a few feet from Daniel. "My name," he said gently, "is Henry Harris, and I owe you the truth." Daniel's mind spun. Harris continued, his tone calm but steady. "I'm not homeless. I'm not poor. I am, in fact, a billionaire. I built this estate, I own several companies, and I've spent most of my life surrounded by wealth. But every once in a while, I step away from all of this. I disguise myself. I go out into the streets as an ordinary man, stripped of everything. I do this for one reason, because I need to know who still sees me as human when I have nothing to offer." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He could barely process what he was hearing. "Most people walk by," Harris went on. "They look through me, or past me, as if I don't exist. But you stopped. You didn't just give me food. You gave me your jacket. You gave me your time. You gave me respect. And that, Daniel, is worth more than any fortune I've ever earned." Daniel staggered back slightly, shaking his head. "Wait, so, all this time, you were testing me?" Harris's expression softened. "Not testing. Observing. Hoping. And you showed me something I desperately needed to remember, that true kindness still exists. That there are people who give, not because of what they can get back, but because it's the right thing to do." Daniel stood there speechless. His knees felt weak, his heart raced, and his world felt like it had turned upside down. But what Harris said next would leave Daniel even more stunned. Because this wasn't just about revealing who he really was. Harris had a plan, one that would change Daniel's life forever. Daniel stood frozen in the grand foyer of the estate. The marble floors gleamed beneath his worn-out sneakers. Chandeliers sparkled above him, casting light on walls lined with art worth more than he made in a year. He felt out of place, like a stranger who had wandered into a world he didn't belong in. Harris, no longer the quiet man sitting on the street, but a commanding presence in a crisp suit, gestured for him to sit. They walked into a study with walls of books, polished wood furniture, and a fireplace that gave off a soft, steady glow. Daniel's voice finally broke the silence. "But I don't understand. Why bring me here?" Harris sat across from him, his eyes steady and kind. "Because, Daniel, you reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. True wealth isn't measured by how many zeros are in your bank account. It's measured by compassion, by character, by the way we treat others when we have nothing to gain." Daniel shook his head, overwhelmed. "But I'm nobody. I don't have money, I don't have connections. I'm just trying to get by." Harris leaned forward, his voice firm. "No, Daniel. You are somebody. You're the kind of man who gives his last meal to a stranger, who takes the jacket off his back, even when he needs it himself. Do you have any idea how rare that is? That's why I asked you here." Daniel's chest tightened. "What are you saying?" Harris smiled faintly. "I want to invest in you. Not as charity, but as a partner. You told me about your dream, the auto shop. You spoke about it with passion, with hope. I want to help you make that dream a reality. I'll provide the funding, the mentorship, the resources. And in return, you run it. You lead it. You build it into something that reflects your heart." Daniel's eyes widened. "You'd do that? For me?" Harris nodded. "For you. Because I believe in you." For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. His throat tightened, and tears welled in his eyes. He thought about all the nights he had gone to bed hungry, all the years he had worked himself to exhaustion with nothing to show for it. And now, someone saw him. Someone believed in him enough to give him a chance. Months later, the ribbon was cut on a small auto repair shop with a modest sign that read, "Daniel's Auto Repairs." The building wasn't flashy, but it was his. For the first time in his life, Daniel unlocked a door that belonged to him. Harris stood proudly beside him that day, not as a billionaire, but as a mentor and friend. And Daniel, now a business owner, made himself a promise. He would never forget how this started. He hired young men who needed a second chance. He offered free oil changes to single moms struggling to make ends meet. And every day, he reminded his employees of the lesson that changed his life. Kindness is never wasted. Because Daniel knew the truth now. That a single act of compassion, even something as small as a sandwich, a cup of coffee, or a worn-out jacket, could set off a chain reaction that changes everything. As he locked up the shop one evening, he thought back to that night. The cold sidewalk, the man with the blank cardboard sign, and how close he came to walking past. But he didn't. He stopped. He cared. And that decision had led him here. Moral of this story: treat everyone with dignity, because you never know who they really are, or how your kindness might come back to change your life forever. This story reminds us all of one powerful truth. Kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything. You never know what someone else is going through, or who they might really be. So treat everyone with dignity, because your compassion could be the reason someone's life takes a new turn. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Together, we can spread kindness, one story at a time. And remember, we're not just telling stories, we're changing lives.